Russian attacks on Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, have killed at least 6 people, according to the city's mayor. And in just some developing news, a US official has confirmed to the BBC that they're now meeting Russian representatives in Abu Dhabi following the Geneva talks between the US and Ukraine about a draft peace plan. Where Russia attacked Kyiv with a wave of missiles and drones, the night sky over the Ukrainian capital was lit up with explosions. Officials say 2 residential apartment blocks were hit. And the city's mayor said that a central high-rise building was evacuated. Once again, residents of the city made their way down into the metro system to spend the night sheltering from the Russian attack. Well, in Russia, the governor of Rostov region said that Ukrainian drones killed 3 people and wounded 10 more. 6 were hit in Krasnodar. Russian defense officials say that more than 200 Ukrainian drones were destroyed. And the UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is going to speak to Ukraine's European allies later today after Washington and Kyiv said that they've agreed a refined peace framework in talks over the weekend. Well, our Ukraine reporter Abdu-Jalil Abdurasalov is in Kyiv. He says there have been reports from Moscow about the Kremlin spokesperson's initial reaction to the revised plan.
Well, we're now actually getting reports from Moscow that Dmitry Peskov mentioned about this new revised document. Dmitry Peskov, the spokesperson of President Vladimir Putin, he referred to it as substantial. So does that mean that the Russian side may accept the new revised document? We still don't know, but there are some signs that the original document, the 28-point peace plan suggested by the US, is now being changed. And Vladimir Zelensky mentioned about this document and said that the new version of this document is doable, as he called it. And he says that the new draft includes fewer points, but it has right elements. That means that the Ukrainian side is far more optimistic, and they may see the new version of this peace plan as something that they can work with and that's something that can bring peace in Ukraine. However, the most contentious bits in this peace plan, such as the territory and the NATO membership, has not been directly addressed in the new version, according to President Zelensky. He says that that's the right approach, because these things must be discussed directly between the presidents, between him and Donald Trump.
Abdu-Jalil Abdurasalov there reporting from Kyiv. Let's pick up on some of those points with Orysia Lutsevich, Deputy Director of the Russia and Eurasia Programme at Chatham House, and also you're the head of the Ukraine Forum. Let's start with the territories, because that was always a red line for President Zelensky. Did it have to go to that stage about taking over the whole of the Donbass in order to move back and just move to the lines that Russia holds now?
Well, I think it's very important to understand why the principle on the territory is important. It's important for Ukraine, but it's also important for the UN Charter. This is how we build relationship between sovereign nations, that the borders should not be changed by force. That's why on one hand, Ukraine is insisting that there is no recognition of Russian occupation by United States or by any other democratic nation, and also that Ukraine is not pressured to retreat from its own sovereign territory and give it to the occupation of Russia. Also, especially because we know what kind of atrocities and persecutions are happening on these territories for Ukrainian population and Ukrainian children.
So would the Ukrainian population accept the lines as they are now with the territories that Russia occupies?
What's important to understand, Kasia, is that in Ukraine, people are ready for peace. They want peace, but not peace at any price. More than 70% of Ukrainians say yes, they would be happy to freeze the current line of contact, the front line, but the rest of the territory must receive a very strong security guarantees that Russia will not reinvade after this phase of the war. And this is where Ukraine needs United States, and Europe, for the same matter, needs United States in order to make the security arrangement for the rest of Ukraine viable and for it to be a very strong deterrence against the future war.
And arguably the strongest security guarantee is NATO membership. If that is off the table, is that acceptable to Ukrainians?
I think at this point, Ukraine is also making 2 points. One, that Russia should not dictate whether in the future Ukraine should or should not be a member of NATO. That's a sovereign choice of Ukraine. But Ukraine is also ready to work with its allies, with the United States, and with current NATO member nations to set up something special for Ukraine. That is not ideal. That is actually threatening more of these nations who are backing Ukraine, not in a collective way as not NATO is. But this is, if this is the reality, Ukraine is ready to work with.
And of course, the European Union were concerned that they had no involvement in this suggested peace plan. Are you concerned about how Donald Trump is pushing this through?
Well, absolutely. What is very concerning is that the plan originally put on the table last week was speaking on behalf of both NATO and European Union, and also these Russian sovereign assets that are held in the EU, especially Belgian jurisdiction, without any prior consultation with what everybody in Europe thinks to be an alliance. And this is where I think also a plan of Putin is through this diplomacy around Ukraine is to really wreck this transatlantic alliance, which prevents him from his militaristic expansion in Europe. This is also one of his goals, why he is engaging in this so-called diplomacy.
Orysia Lutsevich from Chatham House, as always, thank you very much. Also from the Ukraine Forum, appreciate your thoughts there. Much more on this ongoing story, developing story. Also, as we learned that US officials have confirmed to the BBC that they're going to be meeting Russian representatives in Abu Dhabi today. So much more on that. And of course, also the strikes on the ground as well, with 6 people killed in strikes on Kyiv. So do stay with us, because we'll be coming back to this story throughout the day here on the BBC News Channel.